reporter specializing in ISIS, wrote a feature called ISIS and the Lonely Young American for the New York Times about a young woman called Alex who lived in relative isolation with her grandparents in rural Washington. Callimachi covers Alex's conversion from a devoted Christian to a Muslim by the hands of ISIS supporters lurking on Twitter, Skype, and email. Throughout many months, Alex got closer to her new online friends who would slowly convince her of the ways of Islam by talking to her for hours every day and night, sending gifts, and taking advantage of her isolation. Her double life didn't last long, however. Her grandparents confiscated her electronics and discovered his secret. To this day, as outlined in the following paragraph, Alex still talks to her contacts in ISIS. As I'm quoting, she still missed his companionship. Waiting until her grandparents were out climbing on a windy beach on the Washington coast, Alex logged into Skype, the one account her family had forgotten to shut down. Callimachi doesn't necessarily attempt to convince his reader of anything in particular. In fact, he remains extremely neutral and is to a large extent absent in this retelling of Alex's story. It seems his main goal with this piece is to highlight a specific story, while perhaps secondarily casting some light on simultaneously the recruitment strategies of ISIS, issues in isolation in youth, and potential dangers of social media. Although Callimachi's absence leaves a lot to the reader's own interpretive biases, he himself remains surprisingly unbiased throughout. Even when describing Alex's internal feelings, it doesn't seem too devious, as exemplified in the very first paragraph. Here he says that Alex, a 23-year-old Sunday school teacher and babysitter, was trembling with excitement on the day that she told her Twitter followers that she had converted to Islam. It is impressive, considering the background that Callimachi has and how experienced he is with ISIS, that he manages to remain neutral to this extent, lending no biased morals to the story. However, it does seem that he is already familiar with stories similar to Alex's, since he describes the incidents between Alex and her friends with such casual nature as seen in the following paragraph. The following paragraph outlines how one of Alex's friends, Faisal, sends her chocolate, Hallmark gift cards, $20 bills, and in one case encourages Alex to go out and enjoy a pizza with her brother. One interpretation of this could be that Callimachi aims to paradoxically instill a greater sense of disturbance in his readers by not providing his own perspective on the happenings. I personally read paragraphs such as the previous one with a sense of, what, that is not okay. By not hyperbolizing the ordeal, which would not resonate well with the audience of the New York Times in general, he manages to instill a sense of reality in his writing, which further seems to lend to the truth, value, and credibility of his piece. Of course, I myself am I grew up in a Western country, and I am Westernly biased inherently, and I have previous exposure to ISIS matters and I have my own expectations towards ISIS articles. However, Callimachi cleverly puts the focus completely on the girl in this piece. It's very human to feel this need of acceptance and belonging, and this as well affected my own interpretive bias. I live at home right now myself, and the feeling of empathy definitely played around with my readings of the article. I went back and forth between constantly sympathizing and judging. Similarly to how she had Alex her own biases conversing with her friends, I had similar biases reading the article. It seems to be a general theme with Muslim converts that decide to pursue a new life in ISIS, that this feeling of isolation and needing for companionship and community seem to be the driving force. As in this source, which is a Danish article about a Danish schoolboy whose friend turned out converted to Islam and moved to Syria to join ISIS. For example, it is exemplified here, though in Danish, that Stéphane's friend, the ISIS freedom fighter convert, had problems concentrating in school and generally had problems making friends and was isolated. Of course, I'm also biased that I inherently disagree with ISIS and their ways, similar to how the author, I imagine, always also does. I was similarly very biased by recent discussion I've had in empirical analysis about emotional bias and decision making, and I couldn't help but identify the biases in Alex's decisions, which were very much driven by emotion. I thought this was just one case, one weird case, but as it turns out, according to both New York Times in this article that outlines and demonstrates the recruitment techniques of ISIS, and in the report here by the ICSR that outlines the amount of foreign fighters in Syria and Iraq, that this has happened rather frequently. In fact, in Denmark alone, it is estimated that 100 to 150 foreigners, Danish citizens have traveled to Syria to join the war and join ISIS, whereas in US alone has only been 100. It resonated a lot with me and struck with me that it has been so prevalent in Denmark. So rereading the piece while keeping the context of the prevalence of ISIS converts in Denmark and the general situation of ISIS in the Middle East and the crisis in mind, it became a lot. I became a lot more biased and started to shift my focus away from the girl and more towards the issue in general. But seeing the issue with Alex as a side effect of a much larger problem that should be addressed.